Are you a sad individual living under a Parisian opera house and dropping chandeliers on people's heads for fun? Well, you may want to stop because that's a crime and get yourself a podcast. How do you do that? Easy. It's with Anchor. Anchor is a totally free app and website, and you can record from your phone or your computer. You don't need fancy smancy equipment. Seriously, I have recorded podcasts from my bathtub while I was bathing. Anchor is free and super easy to use. Anchor has really simple podcasting tools. You sign up and then you start podcasting. It really is that simple. Within an hour of starting my podcast, I was already distributed on Spotify. Now I'm on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Breaker, and Radio Public. So look for the app or the website. The website is anchor.fm, and the app, just go to your friendly local app store and look up Anchor. That's ANCHOR. Happy podcasting! Hello, it is your favorite Manic Pixie Dream Cryptid from the Kawaii Slutty Breakfast podcast, and we are discussing Season 2 of Westworld, Episode 3, Virtue e Fortuna, which is Italian. It's from Machiavelli's The Prince, and the principles of, basically virtue and fortune, and it's suggesting that virtue is not necessarily a moral thing, but what you need to do to achieve your goals is the virtue, and the ability to compel people to meet your needs, which is very fitting for this episode. But anyway, we're gonna get further into the episode because I am so confused. Let's get into it. So, the woman in the beginning that we open on with the secret mysterious book, that's Emily, right? William's daughter. I think there were a few things. One is that her, I don't want to have sex with the host because it wouldn't be consenting and that wouldn't give me the validation I meant. That seemed like a very William thing to say. And then later on, supposedly they're supposed to go hunting, and I can't remember what it was called. It's the India world, basically. And so she doesn't want to have sex with the host, but she's totally cool with fake hunting robot animals. Okay, sure. Yeah, that makes no sense. So it's got to be Emily. I mean, because the age is right. She seems to have things that have in common with William, and she has this mysterious book. So obviously she's not at the park just for fun and games. So that's interesting. Another thing is that Charlotte's alive. Apparently they went out and Bernard was captured, and then she basically left them for dead, so that she could follow him and get a hold of Abernathy. Very confusing, but okay. Does Charlotte know that Bernard's a host? Is Bernard even Bernard? I sent a copy of the podcast that I did for the first episode and to a friend, and I was like, "Hey, listen to this! I'm so excited!" And they're non-binary, so they were like, "You may want to watch the first episode again." So I did, and right now I will admit that I screwed up, because in the beginning I said that I didn't know if it was Arnold or Bernard. It was definitely Bernard. Dolores specifically says his name. I don't know how to miss that. And also, what's even more embarrassing is it says when Bernard is looking at the host in the little bunker with Charlotte, and he's trying to figure out what's wrong with him. It said that he had prosopagnosia, which is facial blindness. And I really should have caught that because I too have facial blindness. Now, this doesn't mean that I look at people's faces and there's a white blob of nothing. that would be horrifying. Actually, that would pretty much look like the drone host, which, no, that would make my life so much more nightmarish than it already is. But, what it is that I look at people, I can see their eyes, I can see their nose, I can see their mouth, like, I know that there's a person, and there's something that may be, like, vaguely familiar, but it doesn't coalesce. So what I do is that I listen to their voice, their cadence of speech, the way that their mouth looks, facial blemishes. Those are very helpful. The shape of the nose, shape of the mouth, and that's basically how I do. Or otherwise, I just lie and fake it. I'm gonna tell you this story just so you can understand. Like when I worked at Borders, there were customers and this would happen and I wouldn't recognize them, and so I just got in the habit of like asking everybody for their ID, so like nobody would feel like I was playing favorites, because that happened with a lot of people. And it's like, these people have like been coming to the store for months. It's like we recognize them on sight, so it's like we know who they are. We don't really need their ID. But people get really miffed if they feel left out. So I just made a habit to like start asking everybody's ID. So there was this woman, and it's like I knew her from somewhere, but like I can't, like, her voice was like really familiar. So she hands me her ID, and it's my next door neighbor who had been living across the street. Well, not next door, but yeah, basically across the street for like a year. I mean, we were practically next doors because literally I could just walk across the street. It was like the same amount of distance. But yeah, that was awkward. Because she was like, oh, you don't remember who I am? And it's like, sure I do. And I wanted to sink into the floor and die. But anyway, that's not important right now. What's important is what comes up next in the show, is that I really, really like this relationship between Maeve and Lee, because she just keeps on putting him in his place. And the fact that Lee got so mad that, like, basically Hector and Maeve were writing fanfic of his canon, and he didn't like that, it really tickled me. I really enjoyed watching that. But anyway, so it is basically confirmed that Hector and Maeve didn't have like a prior storyline together. So I think that that's really interesting. And I'm wondering if it's actually attraction, or because Maeve basically bumped up her charisma and perception stats. And Armistice is alive, which has made me really happy to see her. She has a cool new shiny black robot hand, which I dig. She comes in and saves the day with a flamethrower, and it's like one of the best things ever. But anyway, so let's get back to the woman. I think it was Emily, because there was a very thirsty dude that she wanted to make the sweet lovelies with. I'm not gonna call it bumping uglies, because that's just weird. But anyway, so her whole thing was like, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to do it with a host because, like I said before, like, that's not really validating. Which, you know, valid point. I'm totally behind that. Her method of dealing with this is to shoot the guy in the chest, because if, like, it blew a hole in him, he was a host, and, well, if it didn't, then he would have a very bruised chest, which she shoots him, and he has a very bruised chest, which, I mean, they were fortunate that this happened before the uprising, because otherwise, you know, he would have died, and nobody would have gotten any booty, and that would be tragic. So, the Force stuff. Dolores teams up with the Confederados and then completely screws them over. And she's like, well, I said that I would need your people to survive, and she's okay with that. Teddy, however, is not. So that makes me wonder if, because my friend also gave me a few spoilers, the spoilers being that I'm kind of right in my theory, but there's another one that I'm completely off of, and they won't tell me which ones, which honestly I think is delightful, because I really like knowing if I'm close or not, but I don't want to know for sure until I finish the finale, which I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But anyway, so the surviving soldiers, Dolores is just like, put them down like the logs they are, and Teddy refuses. So I'm wondering if that's what leads to his death, and that like it's not a body swap thing. So I don't know. It seems like everybody's headed to Sweetwater, which is interesting because young Robert told William that the door was where he began. And like when he realized that Dolores didn't recognize him is kind of where his origin story as being like a complete bag of dicks started. So that was in Sweetwater. That's like where he first saw Dolores. Like almost everything happened in Sweetwater. And also, I rewatched 2, or wait, was it 2? I think it was, yeah, it was 2, because that's when he saw Lawrence, I think. Or maybe it was 1. Man, the way this show is like dealing with time is completely screwing with my head, and I have no idea what's going on, and trying to piece it together is so much fun. So like sometimes it works, and then there's shows like The Witcher, which I tried to watch the first episode and I was so annoyed, which I feel like I shouldn't be, because I knew that like those were based on short stories, but that format didn't really work for me. But this one is fine, so go figure. But anyway, so last we heard, pretty much everybody seems headed to Sweetwater. Oh, I forgot, Dallas. I cannot believe I almost forgot our beloved Peter Abernathy. And oh my gosh, I love this actor so much. I hope that like he doesn't die. Like seriously, because the actor is just phenomenal. He's so good. And like, so Douglas has him, and Bernard actually unencrypted the file, and there was like a one-time use key, which is interesting, and I don't know he used it before. Oh, and I almost forget, because like the show is like completely breaking my brain. Bernard managed to stumble outside after losing Peter, and he sees Clementine, and Clementine bonks him in the head. So that's interesting, because what they did with Peter was they basically cobbled like back of his backstories together, so like they kind of flitted through them. It's kind of like 1 and then 2 and then 3, but would they do the same with Clementine? Because they've said specifically that like when the host's memory was erased, there were still remnants of the files. But when they do the nose drill thing, doesn't that basically destroy the brain, for lack of the better word? Like, so, like, Clementine would basically be a vegetable, right? I mean, because the reason Peter's not is because Lee messed with them. So, how? I'm intrigued. I hope you're intrigued too. Anyway, let's get on to the next episode. Hello, how are you? I'm fine, just when I go to sleep, I will now be worried about seeing terrifying, slowly ridden exercise bikes ridden backwards, because that's a thing that's gonna be in my brain. Thanks, Westworld. So, let's get into it. This is episode 2. season 2, episode 4, The Riddle of the Sphinx. Now, that's really interesting because I remember two Sphinx riddles, and that is what crawls on 4 legs, walks on 2 legs, and then 3 legs, which is man. And then there's another one that was there's 2 sisters. One gives birth to another, who in turn gives birth to the other, which is day and night. Now, those 2 are generally thought to be opposites. So that actually comes into play when we're talking about young William and James Delos, and Craddock and old William. I think I'm just gonna call him Mibby. That's fun. And to talk fully about Craddock and the Man in Black, we gotta talk about the religious iconography from the last episode, Virtue e Fortuna, which is fascinating, and I think I forgot to mention it. So when Dolores and her crew meet up with Craddock at first, they're sitting at a table, and it is very reminiscent of Da Vinci's The Last Supper. And then they all died, so I was like, oh, okay, well, that's that. Well, I think that there might be more to that, because in the same episode, which I actually rewatched, Angela had this thing on her head, and I kind of ignored it before because I thought it was a scarf, and I was like, okay, well, that's kind of weird. But I noticed that there was like blood dropping, and it looks like it's attached to her head. So, like, and it kind of looked like a crown of thorns on second watching. So that's more religious symbolism. Christian, to be exact, if it is a crown of thorn, because like I swear I saw a drop of blood, and I was like, well, that's weird. And it made me wonder, like, did somebody try and staple her scalp to her head? Is that what's going on there? Anyway, hope that's explained, because that was very strange. So the religious stuff, to continue, we've got Craddock speechifying in the church in front of a painting of the crucifixion, right? And then later on, he starts talking about how he defeated death, and basically he can do whatever he wants. And it's such a fascinating parallel between him and Mibby, and the way Mibby was reacting to making his way through the maze. Because if you haven't noticed, like, what he's going through is what he went through as he went through the maze the first time in the first season, just in different ways. Like when he rescued Lawrence from being hung, this time he was being hung upside down, and they were going to let him be stung to death by ants, which pretty awful. Maybe not as bad as hanging. I don't know. Never been hanged or stung to death by ants, so can't answer that. But anyway, and then Craddock starts dancing with Lawrence's wife the way maybe he did before he killed her in front of him. And the reason he did those things was because he knew that there was really no consequence. Like, he could do whatever he wants, and that empowered him the same way Craddock was empowered after Teddy let him live. I mean, because that's like twice that he specifically remembers that he basically cheated death. So basically, he's going on a tear. He might have been a decent person before, but we'll never know, because maybe poured nitroglycerin down on his throat, and then Lawrence shot him. So Craddock's probably gone for good for now, unless somebody does a great job of repairs that's still lurking around the park. So I thought that was fascinating. So, a girl Elsie's alive, maybe not probably, because she wasn't there on the beach and Bernard did not mention her. So I'm assuming that, like, in the now timeline, which is the beach, I think, maybe, because it's acknowledged that Bernard basically has no concept of time, and, like, his memories are out of order. So could he have met with Peter Abernathy after he was rescued from the beach? Maybe. That's interesting. But anyway, so he meets up with Elsie. She's rightfully very angry at him, about to leave him, until Bernard points out that, hey, there is nobody to help us. And it's interesting because what if Elsie's not there, even? Like, that's a possibility too, because if Bernard's undergoing extreme cognitive dissonance and prosopagnosia, then I have a hard time pronouncing that word. It gives me a little bit of trouble, that one. But yeah, then it's possible that he could see somebody and his brain is telling him, oh, well, that's Elsie, because he really wants Elsie to be alive because he doesn't want to kill her. Is she alive? Did Bernard kill her? No idea. Maeve was not in this episode. Dolores was not in this episode. And we get confirmation that the mysterious woman who was captured by the Ghost Nation is actually Maybe's daughter, Emily, and they meet at the end, and it is very possible that she will shoot him in the head. We'll find out about that. That's gonna be a treat. I am so excited. So we found out that they put James Dillis's conscience in a host body. So that is actually a thing. I was right about that. I don't think I was right about somebody putting somebody in Bernard's body, because I think he's too damaged. But they do mention printing bodies, so maybe Bernard gets a new body that's, like, chock full of tasty cortical fluid. So that's why he's not, like, in really horrendous shape, because he's pretty bad off. He ends up getting an injection in cortical fluid, and it grants him fighting skills? I don't know. It was really weird. So anyway, it turns out sometime earlier, no idea when, presumably when Ford was still alive, he went into the lab and murdered a bunch of people, which is interesting, because the lab was number 12, and it also had the symbol that was on Emily's little book in last episode. So that's a neat connection. I have no idea what that is, but anyway, so the number 12 is actually the number of governmental perfection in mythology, and it's also the number of the tarot card, the Hanged Man, which represents transcendence, moving on to, like, a new stage in life, if I remember correctly. Maybe I'm thinking of a different tarot card. But anyway, so, I mean, I know that the number 12 is important in mythology. They actually used it a lot in Battlestar Galactica and The 100. And I remember reading up on it, was like, oh, okay, that's really cool. But anyway, so we don't have Dolores, we don't have Maeve, we don't have Charlotte. Charlotte may or may not show up later because if Bernard's having trouble with time and, like, he's not in a new body, then who knows what's happening when? you know? So it's like, we don't know. I mean, basically, the only, like, pure numbers we get are that at some point at one of William's visits to James, it was 7 years since James had passed. And then later on, he says that they've tried to basically reboot him 149 times. And then just leaves him to basically rot and degenerate. It's pretty horrible. But then it goes towards William's conviction that nobody should live forever, which actually explains a lot about his actions in the first season, like why he wanted an actual, why he wanted to go on hard mode, basically. I'm just gonna go with the video game references. It works for me. So I thought that was really interesting. I'm really looking forward to what happens next. I know that this is like a lot of people's not favorite season, because it's like, I told somebody I was watching it and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, and I gotta tell you, I'm not. I am so excited, and I hope that next episode we get Shogun World. I'm super psyched for that, because the last episode they were at a campfire and there was like a masked ninja type person coming after them, and I'm just like 27 times thrilled about this. I can't wait to see what's coming next. So guess I'll see you then. Bye.